Welcome, everyone. My name is Solimar Salas, and I'm the Vice President for Museum Content and Programming at the Museum of Latin American Art. We welcome you today, Thursday, December 17, to this edition of the MOLAA Zoom Project in conversation with artist Patrick Martinez, where MOLAA Chief Curator Gabriela Urtiaga will discuss with artist his work. We also thank the Dwight Stewart Youth Fund, the Kenneth T. and Eileen L. Norris Foundation, Arts Council for Long Beach, Southern California, Edison, for their constant support for the educational programming at the Museum of Latin American Art. In each chapter, the conversation with the artist and our MOLAA Chief Curator, Gabriela Urtiaga, places the focus on a series of specific artworks which require a close inspection and deliberate process of contemplation and exploration, delving into areas surrounding the creation of works, their sources of research and inspiration, in an effort to immerse ourselves in the world of the artist. In Chapter 5 of MOLAA Zoom Project, we interview the renowned artist Patrick Martinez, whose work explores the socioeconomic detritus and objects of working-class urban and suburban Los Angeles as sites of personal, civic, and cultural loss. Patrick will take us through his studio to show us his works in progress, his process of creation, and the influences present in his work. Patrick Martinez, born in 1980 in Pasadena, California, earned his BFA with honors from Art Center College of Design in 2005. His work has been exhibited domestically and internationally in Los Angeles, Mexico City, San Francisco, Minneapolis, Miami, New York, Seoul, and the Netherlands, at venues including Studio Museum in Harlem, the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery, the Tucson Museum of Art, the Albright-Knox Art Gallery, the Cornell Fine Arts Museum, the Vincent Price Art Museum, and the Museum of Latin American Art. Louver, Galerie Lelong Co, MACLA, the Chinese American Museum, and the Euphrat Museum of Art, among others. Patrick's works reside in the permanent collection of LACMA, the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture, the Nerman Museum of Contemporary Art, the Crocker Art Museum, the Cornell Fine Art Museum, the Pizzuti Collection of the Columbus Museum of Art, and the Museum of Latin American Art, among others. Patrick was awarded a Rauschenberg Residency on Captiva Island, Florida, to be completed in 2021. Also in 2021, Patrick will be at subject of a solo museum exhibition at the Tucson Museum of Art. Currently, Patrick lives and works in Los Angeles, California, and is represented by the Charles James Gallery. With that introduction, I introduce our MOLAA Chief Curator, Gabriela Urtiaga, and the artist, and let them have the forum. Welcome.
Thank you, Solimar, and all the MOLAA team. Thank you for your introduction. Hello, everyone, and welcome to MOLAA. I hope you are well and safe, and thank you for joining us today. I am Gabriela Urtiaga, the Chief Curator at MOLAA, and we are so excited to present to all of you our Zoom project, Chapter 5, featuring LA-based artist Patrick Martinez. Hello, Patrick. How
Hi.
are you? Thank you. Thank you so much for this meeting. Thank you for opening up your studio to MOLAA and our audience. We are so pleased to have you with us today.
Absolutely, anytime, for sure.
Oh, well, how are you doing, Patrick? How are you feeling during this special time?
You know, it was interesting at the beginning. It was kind of like, you know, frightening, just like everyone else, but at the same time, like being an artist, it's in your studio, or even just like, you know, wherever you're working, it seems like you're kind of isolated already, just kind of like in your own world, kind of working at times. And it could feel that way. So it was like a greater version of that. Yeah. But it did, you know, like this kind of shelter in place and the pandemic kind of, you know, forced me to figure out how I can get out more. So I think I found that balance more with, like, you know, exercise and riding my bike and stuff, but also just like thinking about what would you be doing if you had time on your hands, like a good amount of time on your hands. Would you still be doing what you're doing? And definitely I would, I would love doing what I do. And that's something that I was thinking about too. And because I've seen like friends and family doing other things because they have time now, and they're exploring other kind of paths in their lives. So, but I'm just doing more art, I think, now during this time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Patrick, I would like to invite you to start our conversation talking about your creative process, about your beginnings and artistic searches.
Yeah, I mean, the creative process that I'm working with right now is it's bodies of work that I'm working on, but people see them and they kind of either see the connection or they think it's kind of like all over the place. And I think that it is, visually, but there's connections in all of it. And it's kind of the same thing for me. It's just either subtle versions of it or kind of straightforward being the neon text, um, that being like straight, kind of direct, because it comes from advertising, mom and pop advertising. So in that body of work, I'm exploring mom and pop advertising in window storefronts, but then combining it with protest language and literature, poetry, things that I read, things that I kind of come up with. Um, and then I have like, the Peachy folder paintings that I work on. I draw on the Peachy folders, I paint on, and that all has to do with youth and authority. Um, that's like a youth and authority kind of concept where I'm taking the scholastic folder that's known in the US as a Peachy folder, and I'm adding the idea of police and authority figures in that mix. When I was growing up, there was always like police in our high school, and it was something that was curious to me why they were there, and they would always kind of like mess with us, and when we were kids, and then my brother and his friends, and so I saw that early on. That was like the 90s, 94, 95. And then with the uprising in 92, these are all things that informed that work. Even like music, rap music, it was kind of informing this idea of like, yeah, there's a problem here. So how do I address that? And it was in the Peachy folder that I kind of tackled it, remixing that kind of idealized American illustration of kids going to school and playing basketball and smiles, running track. I'm replacing it with kids running for their lives, or like struggling to learn and kind of show up every day for their education.
Yeah.
So yeah, those are kind of like two bodies of work that I'm working on, and then other things also.
Yes, Patrick, you mentioned the PG folder, and I would like to put the focus in a minute in this series because it's really important, because it's your important and political project about police brutality in so many cases, and you work and add new terrible cases like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, right?
Yes.
And the PG folder, which are part of MOLAA collection too.
Yes. I mean, it's interesting because like when I started the process of making them, it wasn't about specific people per se. It was more about um, I started the project in 2005 when I was still in college. Um, and it was general, people getting arrested, kids getting chased by cops. And then fast forward to 2014, 15, we start to get images because everyone has a phone on their camera and video of the incidences and the people that have been slain by police officers, portraits of them showing up in the news. So then I took that and started painting them into the paintings. And that's kind of where we're at with these examples that are up on the screen. Um, this is like, the first one on the yellow piece, the original kind of painting, the yellow and kind of terracotta color red. That piece was the first painting I painted large scale, this kind of series. So I was in, kind of reviewing like Eric Gardner being choked by off-duty, or not off-duty, but a detective in New York for selling loose cigarettes. And he was on the floor tackling him, choking him, and he had a football jersey on that said 99. And I was thinking about the Peachy folder and how the middle kind of scene was a football scene, and Walter Scott, that was running from the police, being shot in the back. That was like the track scene or something, So I was kind of making those connections and wanting to paint them, and that's what you see here on the on the example on the screen. And I just kept on going with that because there was so much image, there were so many images, there were so many videos, portraits. So I just kept on going, and I originally followed the color scheme of the 5 folders that were kind of presented to us as youth. And then I started making up color combinations. And on the left side, my left side, the Lost Color series is a misprint. I treated it like it was a color series that never came out, like mint and red or something like that. So that's the explanation for that.
Yeah, it's amazing and really important in this time. And I have here the new file that Charlie James sent us to MOLAA.
Yeah, that's the latest print folder. So they these are original paintings, but we take these and then I took them and made printed folders of them and passed them out back to the youth and high school, college kids. And the example you just showed was something like that too.
Yeah. Thank you, Patrick. Well, I think we are ready to visit your studio right now.
Okay. Yeah. Let me switch my camera around. I have things up. Some things like you guys mentioned was work in progress. Some are kind of finished. Let me switch my camera around here.
Yes, and I think it's important to know how do you work now and if you have a daily routine.
Okay, yeah. I mean, my daily routine is I try to get to the studio. It's interesting because like during this time, Zoom and meetings and stuff, it's hard to even get out of my house sometimes, because I'm like there. Like yesterday I had 3 Zoom meetings and I'm like, wow, where did the time go? It's already 1 o'clock. I got to get to the studio. So stuff like that. I try to get out of my home, and sometimes I have small pieces at home that I want to work on, and then I just start working on them, and then it's like 4 o'clock. Oh my God, I got to get to the studio. So that's like my daily routine is just like Zoom calls, emails, and then I leave to the studio. I get to the studio around like 12, 11, something like that. But as you can see here, this is a lot of my materials that I'm using. So I'm using, for the landscape pieces, I'm using a lot of house paint, spray paint, things that you see here that I get from like the hardware store or like the OOP section in, Home Depot, paint that's kind of discarded and like $5 or $10 in the, I play with that paint. These are just kind of miscellaneous materials, but I'd also started doing graffiti back when I was 12 years old. So I was trying to manipulate that medium first before I even picked up a paintbrush. So that was an interesting thing. And I've always had it kind of in my, kind of in my repertoire, or just kind of like in the materials section of my art stuff, so it kind of creeped back into my art. And this is kind of an example of that. So these are kind of like surfaces. This is a piece that I finished in Shelter in Place. I started like in March, finished it in the summer, like July. And it's about 16 feet by 7 feet. And it'll be going to New York for the Triennial at El Museo. But I still have it here in LA. But this is kind of the example of like what I understand about painting to this kind of like this point of my life, I guess. So this is like everything I kind of like understand. So in this, I'm using like, house paint and textures with the stucco here, like you would find in businesses and like homes, like the surface is kind of rough. And I mix that in with the house paint and I paint it on. But first I paint like this. I'm using a Central Mexican mural reference, stripping it from the time that they, kind of like came from, and placing them on the side of a market or a liquor store in my mind, in Los Angeles, and then painting it out. So I'll paint this scene first, exactly how it is, and then paint it over, and then wash it away, paint it over, wash it. So it's layered, and that's like about time and just kind of like how things are kind of, like there's an erasure, but kind of excavating back into the past and trying to make it present again.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like these. Okay.
Sorry, Patrick, but I think your work is always inspired by the city of Los Angeles, right? You put the focus in the landscape, the people, the color, and about the dynamic duality of the city, correct? What
Yes.
does the city mean to you?
I don't know, like, so for me, I have like like my background is mixed. My mother's was Filipino. My dad is Native American, indigenous Mexican, like from Chihuahua. And so I come from like a mixed, like there was some ambiguity there, but I was a mixed child. So in Los Angeles, you find a lot of that, the connections of people, the mixtures of people, the bridges to other places that, that kind of have like a interesting community. I lived in many places in Los Angeles, and you always kind of get an understanding for the community just by walking around and understanding like what kind of stores there are, kind of food places there are in the area. And so like, just like this, the mom and pop shops that are around, you start to kind of get a gauge of that. And sometimes you find like some interesting connection, like layering of people and cultures and things like that. So I think that like LA is like, it's very they have pockets of just like interesting cross sections, and in these landscapes I try to create a third space of like, what does that look like, like that mixture or like that kind of combination of things. And this landscape is, and the landscapes that I do are kind of like 4 to 5 different places combined in one, through memory, through actually taking photos of areas of LA and then kind of trying to replicate them, murals, kind of signage, things like that. But LA is that for me. It's like this kind of like dynamic conversation, like rhythm that I don't know, like I don't really see it anywhere else. Like it's New York is kind of the same, but it's like always evolving and revealing itself on the daily for me. So I'm just picking up on those cues at times, and like the interesting kind of layering that I see, the changing landscape too, how things are changing. Those are things that I see in the in the landscape, and the people in the landscape. Like everything is just super like alive and dynamic. So I don't know. I think that it's like this alive and dynamic, breathing, evolving landscape that reveals something new every day.
Yes, and I am really interested in this kind of series because I can see this series like a network with a lot of information that you mentioned, because it's not only an aesthetic experience, right? We can see the influential with the graffitis, comics, cartoon in this kind of large painting, but you are sharing the knowledge and commitment with the community, but also people can reflect with your work, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And I think that they can place themselves in it too. Kind of like there's a connection and a familiar, like even if you're not from LA, it's like it's familiar in many places. Like there's something that kind of speaks hopefully to you, and they connect that way. But even like in the archive photos that I'm using from my family, like placing themselves in that, like, that's my grandfather and one of his really good friends, and my cousin, and then, my grandfather again. And there's all, all from Los Angeles. And, in that, like, I think people can kind of place themselves in there. That's my father right here. with my uncles and my aunt. Back in, they were in South Central back in the 1950s, I think.
Yeah.
So just showing that kind of like, those family photos, I think people can kind of like, maybe, when they get up close to it, they can connect that way. They can connect with it in aesthetic ways. They can connect with it in the material kind of sense also. Yeah.
Yeah. It looks amazing, really amazing.
I guess I could walk around a little bit more if you want.
Yes,
If that's okay. Yeah. So, my place is kind of I was shooting earlier this week, so it's kind of scattered around. But my table's not really here. This is a cake that I'm working on. It's pretty much done. It's Frederick Douglass. I'm doing like a lot of these. It's kind of like ongoing of people that I feel that need to be painted into, the limelight or just kind of like featured. Frederick Douglass was one of like the most photographed people back in his day, but he's an American abolitionist, orator, true American, right? So it's just someone that needs to be kind of, for me, painted and like refreshed. So a lot of his photos were in black and white, so I converted this one into color when I was painting it. And I wanted to like give him like a new kind of feel, like a new sense of like just another version, not just of old photo, but just like this alive version of like this colored painting. So on top of that, there's just like this idea of like presenting them as cakes and celebratory portraits more than just aesthetic, just more like we're celebrating this person.
Yeah, and this is a colorful piece, a little different with other because you are adding in the center of the cake, right? A Frederick Douglass, an important figure in American history, but not necessarily recognized by everyone. And
Right.
you are talking about this, and this is really important. And what is the idea behind?
Yeah, I mean it's just it's referencing like traditional portraits, but also just the sheet cakes that are sold in many cities across Los Angeles, birthday cakes that you print edible photos on. So if it's that person's birthday, you'll print a photo of them back when they were 15 years old, if they're turning 50 years old, or maybe like a kid photo of them, or just like a new version of new photo of them printed on the cake. They put it on the cake and then you eat it. So that was kind of the idea behind it. It was kind of like this reference to those photo cakes that are on sheet cakes that are just like this, just flat, and they're just kind of like this edible photo put on top. And then you just go, oh, happy birthday, do the birthday, the whole thing, and then cut the cake and eat it. So that's kind of like what I get the idea from. But yeah, I'm just these are ceramic elements again. There's like roses. They're made out of clay. These are the clay pieces here. I use spray paint to color them. I don't use traditional methods, but I do cook them, and I use my kiln to cook them. This is the kiln here. So I get I'll make them from clay and put them in and get them cooked. And then I just I make them all each by hand, so it takes some time. So I'll just, make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like probably 8 in a day when I need them. And then every day I'll make 8. They need to dry out and then cook them. I'm working on another cake right now. So this is Ruben Salazar.
Yes.
And this will be next to the Frederick Douglass cake. And, when it shows in the gallery.
Yeah.
It'll be going to Madrid soon. And let me show you some material. These are some old pieces here. This is the old, the peachy folder that I painted. It's on some of the prints, folder prints.
Yes.
Here is some of the neons that are kind of stored away, but they're being shipped soon. Some other projects. These are the varsity jackets that I made that are inspired by the paintings that you had first shown, the Peachy Folder paintings. They are all embroidered. They're just one of one, so they're on felt, like varsity jackets, but they're this is all chain stitched.
Mm,
You could see. And
yes.
this is the front of them. And it's just kind of like another version of the folder, you know, just trying to put this kind of idea back into the context of like a high school.
Yeah.
I did a show at Harvard Westlake, and my first show at a high school, they had a gallery, one of the more affluent areas and more kind of wealthy high schools, and this kind of inspired that. I had the idea, but I really wanted to do it, and then I finally took some time and got it done.
Yes, and Patrick, as an artist interested in your contemporary time, you were developing a very important series that with neon, like Emergency, a powerful and political installation, right?
Yes.
Can we explore a little more about the process of the research and your commitment about this issue?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, a lot of the things that I'm able to get into neon and the text, it was for this time, the last 4 years, I felt like there were more warning signs and more like a, you know, kind of like just either words of affirmation, but you know, also just more warning signs than anything, right? So I was thinking in that context, like I read a book a few years ago, Hope in the Dark, and Rebecca Solnit had mentioned in her book that from emergencies, new things emerge, you know? And I thought about that when we went into this pandemic and how people come together and pull out and do good things, you know, from bad situations. So this is all that is. It's almost referencing an emergency, kind of like you know, maybe like a urgent care center or something, or hospital, but the NCY at the end don't like, they're not, it's not lit up, so it's just emerge. So you know, it's referencing that kind of idea from Rebecca Solnit and Hope in the Dark, and that, you know, from emergencies, good things come from people that kind of you know, if you put them in a situation where things, they're at odds, they're going to come through with some good things. There's good things that are going to come from that, and that's kind of the idea of this piece.
Yeah. And I really know that the language and communication is really important in your production, right? The message is the core point of your artwork. Why do you decide to select this sentence and not other, for example?
It's just kind of like, if it resonates with me, then I'll do it, right? Like, so it's like if something really, like something really has to be on my shoulders or like holding me, like kind of like bugging me, like I have to do this now because it's something that I feel in my gut, in my heart, that has to be out there. Like the world, you know, maybe the world needs to see this, or like, that's how I think. It's like this has to exist, you know. So I do that. Sometimes it's timely, sometimes I just want to do it because I feel like I need to do it, but it's all because I want to see it take a physical space and exist on its own and hang somewhere, and you know, like shine bright. So it's I have a bunch of ideas, and if one or two of them stick out and really resonate with me and make me you know, if they really touch me or kind of move me, then I'm gonna make it. And sometimes it's like, you know, one, sometimes it's four, sometimes it's five, but I'm not really into like this idea of like, I have to make 5 a month or something like that. It's just more like, oh, I need to do that one piece because it's really something I'm thinking about a lot right now. So then I put it out.
And Patrick, what is the place of the audience in this kind of piece? Because we know that you have it in the neon, but during the last time you printing directly in paper, right? And
Yeah.
interact with the community too.
Yeah, I think that this comes from the community. It comes from a community aesthetic. It comes from mom and pop advertising in the community. So like placing it back into that window, that wall, that where people can see it. I'm also trying to build a bridge like the folders to get to extend myself out to people that aren't going to art shows, people that aren't going to museums, but they want to participate or just are interested in art, extending myself out to them. And if they agree or they're interested in what I have to say, then that's cool too. But I have different ways of doing that. So this is a sign. I can take this and place it on like a corrugated plastic sign that sits in your lawn, because it's the same kind of language for me. It's all community kind of. It's in the space. Um, it's in the community. It's either sitting on your lawn, sitting in a window, in a mom and pop shop. But this is what you're referencing. I think it's like corrugated
Yeah.
plastic, and it's printed both sides, and it sits on the lawn with these metal stakes. But
Yes.
this is another affordable version of the neon. I think that's the affordable version of it, and it's not like you have to have a lot of money to get it. I'm trying to make it build bridges so that people can kind of connect with the work.
Yes. Sure. And I think it's an open artwork because the interaction with the audience is really important, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's something like what I noticed too with like the lawn signs. It was a big thing with people being in there, wanting to show them off and like putting them in special ways, like on their lawn, designing things around them, putting them in specific places so people could see them. Because during the time too, during this pandemic, people aren't going to museums right now, and art shows. So maybe I could probably create an art show in front of their lawn somehow.
Yes, sounds good.
Yeah. Here's another. This is a one I just finished. This is about. God, I don't know what the size, 10 by 5. Or I forgot what size it is, but this has to do with the uprising this summer, the George Floyd protests, and I'm using materials here that are board. The wood that you see boarded up windows and businesses. This is more of like a minimal piece, but like broken neon inside the windows, and there's glass in it, glass on the floor with a neon piece with. So the words are kind of scattered inside because this is broken. This is all broken inside, but it's all working neon. But it says a Bell Hooks quote is "There can be no love without justice," and
Yeah.
it's kind of the idea. There's also a shirt coming out of here. It's a Adidas shirt, but the idea comes from the uprisings in the summertime, and that when we were out there protesting or checking, just being out there was people that were looting and stuff like that. But even on the news, the way they portrayed it was like something of more like why are it was always about property, and they were talking about property and people, and they didn't understand on the news why they were doing it. And it's just like it's this kind of like reaction that I had, was that obviously it's like Bell Hooks said, if there's no justice, there's people don't feel love. They're gonna act out. They're gonna break windows. They're gonna, what I mean. So that's kind of like the inspiration for the painting, and it's kind of trying to get new materials that I'm working with, kind of like that I've experienced during the summer or this year,
Yeah.
that have kind of come up, right? And this was, people didn't board up their windows last year. It was just this year, and this is kind of like a signifier of this year, like this kind of what we're going through and why we're going through it. So this neon element is breaking out and just sitting on the floor, so it kind of sits like that.
Yeah, it's like an installation too, right?
Yeah, because it's sculptural, and it's not as colorful as the other pieces are not. This is supposed to mimic, there's still stucco here, but it's supposed to mimic like Century City or somewhere that's like you're shopping. This is a business and someone broke into it. It's not about like murals, and there's a little bit of graffiti on the side here, but it's it says George Floyd, a part of it. It's not finished, and things that are painted out by the city. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And then this is another piece that's inspired by the Central Mexican murals that I kind of just am completing with the banner tarps. And so, yeah, this is kind of a smaller piece for me.
Yes, Patrick, it looks amazing, and we are so happy to receive a lot of information, a lot of inspirational ideas and knowledge. And the most important thing is your commitment, right, with the contemporary time and the different important issues that are happening during the last year. And well, I don't know, but I would like to open the Q&A session to hear our audience with different questions about your work too.
Absolutely.
Yes. Well, Jorge is the curatorial assistant, and he can read the question from our audience.
Haven't already, please send in your questions via the Q&A feature or the chat. So let's get started. Andrea Espinosa writes, one thing I've noticed a lot in your art is the 3D roses / flowers, and was wondering, what are the significance behind them, if there is one?
There is. So on the landscape, in the landscape pieces, the paintings, they signify hurt and trauma, but they're inspired by street memorials. So like, if you could picture a street memorial, like roses and like a bouquet of flowers, in a makeshift memorial on the street, someone that was hit by a car or someone that was killed, it's kind of like, just like for me, it's like part of the landscape. And it's like this, like you see them in random places and you wonder what happened, what kind of tragedy took place. And they're that hard and soft, that soft kind of rose or soft color flower against that cold concrete. It's just something that I was drawn to, and I kind of sporadically put them across more kind of as a painting element, and abstracting it and placing it on the surface of instead of on a street, but on the surface of a stucco wall. Yeah.
Definitely, thank you. Michael Bardales Uriostegui writes, what inspired you to make signs versus painting them?
I think because I wanted to make them because I started seeing them at night. In 2008, I made my first one, but I think that I felt that it would speak, like, like painting is just like a execution thing, like some people can paint, some people can do other things, they can concept, but for me, I could have painted it, but it wouldn't have spoke, in the same kind of vein, like it wouldn't speak the same way like it would. I just wanted it to look like I took it out of a liquor store or a market and put it up in a gallery or wherever. And vice versa. I wanted it to look like it was something that could hang in a liquor store and put, but it just spoke louder than I could, if I painted it. And that's something I urge people to think about, is to not think about, think about your craft, but also if there's another way to do it, and a new way of doing it, a new way of looking at things, the perspective, and not just, be tied down to your skill.
All right, thank you for that. Another question from Harold Arandia says, Patrick, first, I love your work. I also grew up in Pasadena and am a fellow Art Center grad. Your work resonates with me because it's a clash of colliding worlds, images and messages flipped. You are saying something using the mainstream vernacular of signage and products I grew up with and switch the context and take over the messaging. How was that type of work received early on? Especially if you say you started the Peachy project early on in school before it became mainstream to talk about these subjects. What type of perspective did you receive, if any? What type of perspective did you receive, if any?
Yeah, I mean, I was doing that work. I mean, to be honest, I started Art Center in 2002, and I was painting like my brother with his like juvenile hall records, like painted as collage on the back, or, you know, painting on top of the collage on the back, and painting my friends and his friends, my brother's friends, and they were black and brown, big figures. I wasn't, they thought, you know, like when they see that stuff, early 2000s, they're, you know, they're thinking that it's hood stuff, it's ghetto, it's, you know, it's, and I mean that like in a way of like them just trying to simplify it so they can understand it, you know, and they go, oh yeah, whatever, you know, it's what it is. It's just, you know, that way they can just dismiss it and not, sorry about that. They can just kind of dismiss it and not worry about it. Or they don't have a way to, I don't know, to judge it. So they just dismiss it and they just put it in a box. But that's what I got. I didn't get any kind of like, you know, like great kind of feedback on it. I remember making the Peachy folder, and the only kind of teacher that got it was like fired 2 years later, you know, at Art Center. But he was kind of a radical kind of teacher. But on top of that, like other classes that I had the Peachy folder in, they didn't understand it. They didn't know what I was talking about. They, in their mind, they were post-racist, you know, racism. Like this, there's no racism going on. What are you talking about? This is America. This is, everyone's treated equally. I don't know what you're talking about. And it's like, and then the only thing with me, I felt like something was wrong with me because I'm like, oh, I'm tripping then, like, cause maybe I'm just like, need to get over this. Like, maybe I just need to stop making this work. But I continued on because I knew that I wanted to see it there. Like, I didn't, you know, I didn't care if it, you know, I didn't think that the work that I was making would be in galleries and stuff like it would be now. Like, to be honest, like I just, you know, not to sound like I'm like some kind of like, you know, person that's like, oh, I'm an innovator and I don't care. And I wanted the stuff to be in galleries and, you know, things hanging, right? That's obvious. I want to share with people. That's why I started making work as a child. I liked making it and then connecting with people. But I don't know, from the feedback back in 2002, 2003, 4, 5, I mean, I thought I was a burden. You know, I thought it was just like, oh, he's doing that again, or like, why is he doing stuff like that? And I just felt like a big resistance overall. It's just like, but you know, I come from, you know, graffiti and stuff like that. So it's like this renegade art, and it was just right up my alley. So I just continued to do it, find new ways of presenting the idea.
Okay, I'm gonna have a last call for more questions if anyone has any more, but I'll ask one question while we see if someone else has questions. You mentioned earlier hip hop as a critical influence on you.
Yeah.
Can you expand a little bit on that and talk about how the culture and aesthetics of that has influenced you and your work?
I think hip hop, or like I say hip hop because like my introduction to graffiti was my brother tagging on things, but then also spray can art, which was New York pretty much, and Paris. Spray can art and subway art, right? And that was, you just looking at the photos and you're like, wow, look at these guys, you know, and they were hanging out with breakdancers. So then you pick up or watch Wild Style Wars, and you're like, oh my God, hip hop, like graffiti's part of hip hop. That's why I guess it's like this like exciting thing. And me coming from, you know, some, you know, there's some ambiguity of my, you know, my upbringing, my mother's Filipino, there's like a mixture. So they're not teaching me the languages. I gravitated towards it. I was like, this is dope. Like, not even like thinking like, oh, this is like something like a subculture I want to be part of. I just thought it was so so interesting. And the entry point was graffiti. I was already listening to rap music, so that was another element. But in LA, I think it was more, there was a gang undertone too. So it was like the 90s, and there was the uprising, and there was like, there was like more of a gang filter on everything. So it was like, it couldn't be too hip hop or like, it was just like rap music. People like, the connection was like rap music and graffiti. Breakdancing was like some New York stuff that some of my friends did. And DJing, like, you know, you just had a friend that DJ'd at a backyard party. Rapping, I knew some people, but you know, that part of it was interesting, but it was more just like the lifestyle of graffiti and rap and stuff like that. That was kind of the day to day, and that's what I kind of mean by that. And it's something that you know, I listen to all kinds of music now, but you know, rap is something that always kind of informed me, and I understand it now, and I've unpacked that whole kind of like genre of music. And you know, I don't know the language, so I use it sometimes in the text-based work, sometimes in paintings. And I also come from back in the day. I used to do a lot of the underground rappers record covers and CD covers and their tape covers, packaging. And I used to do promotions right out of high school for Loud Records. I was doing street promotion, stickers, posters for Big Pun, Exhibit, Wu-Tang Clan, all this stuff. I was like 17 years old. And I learned about visibility that way, you know, like it's a crazy thing. And then fast forward, when I got out of school, I was working for rap magazines, Double XL, Rhyme Magazine, Herb Magazine. That's when magazines still existed, right? And then they just took a tumble 2 years later. So that's what I mean by the connection to rap and hip hop and stuff. Yeah.
Thanks. That's very exciting. One more question from Harold. How hard was it to push on stating the facts that you just touched on, being the oddball as far as what your work was saying, that what you were, where you started then was not really what was in the gallery scene. You persevered, but it must have been daunting to leave school and stick to what you wanted to say versus be part of what was currently popular. What advice can you give to artists that are struggling with that now?
I think that, you know, like, why would you want to be part of something that is already existing? I don't know. Like, I wanted to make art that, like, for me, when I was growing up, it was whack to be like someone else, or like, oh, that's like, your stuff looks like what's his name. It's like, but fast forward, like, that's just like, you know, teenagers talking. But fast forward now, like, think about what you want to add to the conversation of art, and do that. It doesn't, whatever your experience is, like, please do it. Like, we need that. Like, it doesn't need to be my experience. Don't be like me, be like someone else, be yourself, let your experience inform your work, I think, because then that way we get a fresh new take on what we need to be looking at and what we're seeing. It's not like mine, it's not like someone else's, it's not contemporary art trends. Like, you know, we're just looking at everything that you saw at an art fair. It's something that's, you know, honest, and you can speak to, and then you can talk about. There's no problem talking. I don't like, you know, I never liked talking, you know, like when I was 6, 7 years old, in in elementary school, they thought I didn't speak English, you know, and they put me in ESL class. And my parents were like, all he knows is English. And my preferred way to speak was art. Like, I drew, and, you know, but now I have, you know, I do these Zoom talks and all this stuff. And it's just something I can do because I feel that it's my experience. So I have no problem talking about that.
Thank you. Question from Nicole. How do you engage with arts institutions? How do you want them to engage with you as an artist who thinks through these kinds of issues of hierarchy, of injustice, and of not fitting into oppressive systems?
I don't know if I think that I want them to engage with me in a certain way. I know why they're engaging with me sometimes, you know, and that's just because when you do something for such a long time, you just kind of understand how things work. And I don't assume, or just I don't claim to know everything about how this art world works, because I'm just learning. I'm always reading about it, and but having said that, during this time, I think there's a lot of there's a lot of checks, boxes to be checked, right? So the language that I'm spewing in the work that I'm doing checks some of those boxes, and hopefully I do it in a unique way that the museum wants to do something with me, and it's also a way for them to look inclusive at times, and I know that, and but I think that's work that needs to be done, and we need to show, like, I'm not gonna shy away from, like, I don't want to work in the museum, I'm keeping it only me. It's like, no, I want that 7-year-old version, that 7-year-old me or 8-year-old me to visit a museum and see themselves in it, and it's not about like being cool or whatever. It's just really just like that innocence of, like, that youth just coming in and, like, not saying anything, and just like, what does that feel like when you guys know what that feels like when you go into a space and you don't see yourself in it. I don't want that. Like, I want to work with these places to make sure that there's either a hint or some representation there, and I'm trying to do that now.
Thanks. And that'll conclude our Q&A. Thanks so much to everyone who submitted questions, and thank you, Patrick.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Jorge, and thank you so much, Patrick. You are an inspiration for us, and thank you for your generosity and for opening up your studio today.
Anytime, for sure.
It was a pleasure to talk with you and learn more about your creative process and about you. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for the time, and thanks for doing it. Appreciate you.
And thank you, all of you, for joining us today. Our next Zoom project will be on January with the Chicana very remarkable artist, Linda Vallejo. Okay, awesome. See you soon, and thank you so much, Patrick.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for the time. Bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.